Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Alita.
And I'm Jonas Holdeman. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
On today's show, we will be talking about the evolution of justice.
But first, we want to tell you a little about our sponsors of the show. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30 p.m. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty said at the Atheist Experience said, everyone is welcome to come to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions afterwards. The second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we're mixing it up, sometimes with a get-together we call a reflections meeting, and it features a potluck lunch in someone's home. And sometimes we meet to play board games or other similar activities.
Later in the show, we will give you our websites to visit for additional details, including times and locations.
In the news. This has been an important week for news. On July 7th, Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat, Wisconsin, stood on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives and honored Freedom of Religion Foundation principal founder Ann Nicole Gaylor, who died last month, for the Congressional Record. She didn't die last month for the Congressional Record. She was honored for in the Congressional Record.
Oh, in part, he said, Ann's commitment to community and work as an activist, feminist, and freethinker have been invaluable to Wisconsin.
This may be the first time Congress has honored an atheist.
In other news, South Carolina pulled the Confederate flag from its place of honor at the State House on Friday, July 10th.
A crowd of nearly 10,000 onlookers chanted, "USA, USA," and "Hey, hey, hey, goodbye."
And we can add to that, good riddance.
Also this week, Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear stood on the side of the U.S. Constitution when he told Casey Davis that as a county court clerk he must issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples or step down.
Thank you, Governor Beshear, for stepping up. And now, the topic of our program today is the evolution of justice, that is tracing how justice has the concept of justice has evolved from early times in our history to the current time. Justice in its broadest context includes both the attainment of that which is just and the philosophical discussion of that which is just. The concept of justice is based on numerous fields and many differing viewpoints and perspectives, including the concepts of moral correctness based on law, equity, ethics, rationality, religion, and fairness. Often, the general discussion of justice is divided into the realm of societal justice and as found in philosophy, theology, and religion, and procedural justice as found in the study and application of the law.
The concept of justice differs in every culture. An early theory of justice was set out by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in his work, The Republic. Throughout history, various theories have been established. Advocates of divine command theory argue that justice issues from God. In the 1600s, theorists like John Locke argued for the theory of natural law. Thinkers in the social contract tradition argued that justice is derived from the mutual agreement of everyone concerned. In the 1800s, utilitarian thinkers, including John Stuart Mill, argued that justice is what has the best consequences.
Theories of distributive justice concerned what is distributed between whom, and between whom they are to be distributed, and what is proper distribution. Egalitarians argued that justice can only exist within the coordinates of equality. John Rawls used a social contract argument to show that justice, and especially distributive justice, is a form of fairness. Property rights theorists also take a consequentialist view of distributive justice and argue that property rights justice maximizes the overall wealth of an economic system. Of course, none of these addresses the universal justice for the environment and welfare of the earth and other species.
Theories of retributive justice are concerned with punishment for wrongdoing. Restorative justice, also sometimes called reparative justice, is an approach to justice that focuses on the needs of victims and offenders.
This sounds very abstract. We will be dealing with the evolution of the concept of justice from a humanist viewpoint. Richard Dawkins says in his book, The God Delusion, there seems to be a steadily shifting standard of what is morally acceptable. The shift is in a recognizably consistent direction which most of us would judge as an improvement. The shift is not a smooth incline, but a meandering sawtooth. Assuming the concept of justice is evolving for the better with time, what principles guide that evolution? And in what sense might modern justice be an improvement over ancient justice?
One might argue that the concept of fairness and justice predates the human species. There are observations that when a troop of monkeys collectively forage for food, if one member is discovered hiding food for himself, he's punished. There is the concept of fairness, perhaps necessary for group cohesion, accepted in the context of rank and gender. Is there something in human nature that guides culture towards justice?
Understandings of justice differ in every culture, as cultures are usually dependent on a shared history, mythology, and/or religion. Each culture's ethics create values which influence the notion of justice. Although there can be found some justice principles that are one and the same in all or most of the cultures, these are insufficient to create a unitary justice apprehension.
Let's survey some of the thoughts and considerations of social justice that have been proposed.
The first thought deals with the idea of harmony. In his dialogue, Republic, Plato uses Socrates to argue for justice that covers both the just person and the just city-state. Justice is a proper, harmonious relationship between the warring parts of the person or city. Hence, Plato's definition of justice is that justice is having and doing what is one's own. A just man is a man in just the right place, doing his best, giving the precise equivalent of what he has received. This applies both at the individual level and the universal level. A person's soul, according to Socrates, has three parts: reason, spirit, and desire. Similarly, a city has three parts. Socrates uses the parable of a chariot to illustrate this point. A chariot works as a whole because the two horses' power is directed by the charioteer. Lovers of wisdom, the philosophers, in one sense of the term, should rule because only they understand what is good. Really? If one is ill, one goes to a medic rather than a farmer, because the medic is an expert in the subject of health. Similarly, one should trust one's city to an expert in the subject of good, not to a mere politician who tries to gain power by giving people what they want rather than what's good for them. Socrates uses a parable of a ship to illustrate this point. The unjust city is like a ship in the open ocean, crewed by a powerful but drunken captain, which is the common people. A group of untrustworthy advisors who try to manipulate the captain into giving them power over the ship's course. This is the politicians. And a navigator, the philosopher, who is the only one who knows how to reach or how to get the ship to port. For Socrates, the only way the ship will reach its destination, the good, is if the navigator takes charge. And we will contest that in a little bit.
And then there's divine command. Advocates of divine command theory argue that justice, and indeed the whole of morality, is the authoritative command of God. Murder is wrong and must be punished, for instance, because, and only because, God commands that it is so. Humans have nothing to do with it. Divine command theory was famously questioned by Plato in his dialogue. Euthyphro, not sure I pronounced that correctly.
Very good.
But called the Euthyphro dilemma, it goes as follows. Is what is morally good commanded by God because it is morally good? Or is it morally good because it's commanded by God? We go round and round in the circle. The implication is that if the latter is true, then justice is arbitrary. If the former is true, then morality exists on a higher order than God, who becomes little more than a passer-on of moral knowledge. Now, many apologists have addressed this issue, typically by arguing that it is a false dilemma. For example, some Christian apologists argue that goodness is the very nature of God, and there is necessarily reflected in his commands. Another response, popularized in two contexts by Immanuel Kant and C.S. Lewis, is that it is deductively valid to argue that the existence of an objective morality implies the existence of God, and vice versa. Huh.
Yeah, I get confused when they start talking about the nature of God and being at one with the universe here.
Yes.
Then there's the concept of natural law. This can get us into trouble. I mean, it sounds good, but...
Right.
Okay, for advocates of the theory of justice, for advocates of the theory that justice is part of natural law, that is John Locke, it involves a system of consequences that naturally derives from the action or choice. In this, it is similar to the laws of physics, in the same way as the third of Newton's laws of motion requires that for every action there must have been an equal and opposite reaction. Justice requires, according to individuals or groups, what they actually deserve or merit and are entitled to. Justice on this account is a universal and absolute concept. Laws, principles, religions, and are merely attempts to codify that concept, and sometimes with results that entirely contradict the true nature of justice. Now, part of the problem I have is how do you observe this natural law associated with justice? And if justice be not served in the course of your observation, are you apt to be misled into what is really involved?
And is it like a law of physics? There's the question. And then there's justice as a human creation. In contrast to the understandings canvassed so far, justice may be understood as a human creation rather than a discovery of harmony, divine command, or natural law. Now, this claim can be understood in a number of ways, with the fundamental division being between those who argue that justice is the creation of some humans and those who argue that it is the creation of all humans.
Then there's the concept of mutual agreement. According to thinkers in the social contract tradition, justice is derived from mutual agreement of everyone concerned, or, in many versions, from what they would agree to under hypothetical conditions, including equality and absence of bias. This account is considered further below as the justice of under justice as fairness. The absence of bias refers to an equal ground for all people concerned in the disagreement, or for trial in some cases.
Then there's subordinate value. Now, according to utilitarian thinkers, including John Stuart Mill, justice is not as fundamental as we often think. Rather, it is derived from the more basic understanding of rightness, consequentialism. What is right is what has the best consequences, usually measured by the total or average welfare caused. So, the greatest good for the greatest number. So the proper principles of justice are those that tend to have the best consequences. These rules may turn out to be familiar ones, such as keeping contracts, but equally they may not, depending on the facts about real consequences. Sometimes you don't know the consequences until further on down the road. Either way, what is important is those consequences, and justice is important, if at all, only as derived from that fundamental standard. Mill tries to explain our mistaken belief that justice is overwhelmingly important by arguing that it derives from two natural human tendencies: our desire to retaliate against those who hurt us, and our ability to put ourselves imaginatively in another's place. So when we see someone harmed, we project ourselves into her situation and feel a desire to retaliate on her behalf. If this process is the source of our feelings about justice, that ought to undermine our confidence in them.
Well, when they start talking about consequences, I ask which consequences, which are important, or the important measure of justice. Is it the justice, is that serves the wealthy, the powerful, or those less powerful? Well, Alita, I see we have a call.
All right.
And so let's see what our caller has to say. Hello, caller. Welcome to Freethought Forum. And may we have your name or a nickname, please?
Well, hey, it's Faithless Forest. I was watching the show and learning a lot of good vocabulary. Are you hearing me there in the studio? Okay?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
All right. So it was interesting hearing the different enumerations of maybe theories of justice, some of which I've never heard before. But it seems to me there were 2 points you made that I thought you could join together. And since I turned the TV down a while ago, if you've already done this, then I have to say my apology. But you talked about animals having a sense of justice, and in particular the example I think you gave was that amongst other primates, hoarding of food would be punished. And then elsewhere, that something to the effect that justice is something like a human construct. I think we could take the two together and say that it is a community construct, and to the extent that the chimps form a community, or we may form a community with other non-human animals, there's a kind of a bargain going on with all of that, and our non-human companions in life, they don't have the fineness or eloquence of expression we do, but nevertheless we do kind of enter into a bargain with them when we take them into our lives.
I'd like to pick up a little bit on what you had to say, Forrest, because I've been reading some of the work of
Call me Faithless.
Faithless. All right, Faithless. I've been looking at the work of Frans de Waal, who's a primatologist and an ethologist. So he looks at the ethos involved in primates, and he's worked at the Yerkes National Primate Research Center, and now he's working at Emory University in Atlanta. One of his books was Chimpanzee Politics and Our Inner Ape. And his research centers on primate social behavior, including conflict resolution, cooperation, inequity aversion, and food sharing. And one of his experiments had to do with capuchin monkeys. And all of the capuchin monkeys were totally happy to do whatever tasks were asked of them if they were given cucumber slices. Apparently, cucumber is a delicacy for capuchin monkeys. This worked fine until some of the capuchins could see other capuchin monkeys getting grapes for the same task. And they developed a sense of injustice and would stop doing the task for the cucumbers because the others were getting grapes and they weren't. And that wasn't fair. So I think that this sense of justice is somewhat in our genes. We've inherited this through an evolutionary process. And then we build on it, as you say, from the community that we have with other humans. So justice is in our genes, but also we tend to augment it by trying to find a way to work in a community to our best advantage.
Yeah, there was another point.
The argument I was trying to make is that perhaps a word needs to be coined so that we don't say that it's a human construct, it's a social construct, and that at least in the case of the social systems that other primates have, we recognize they come to similar conclusions. But I think I stepped on Jonas. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to address kind of what you're addressing here, but the other point you made, without the context of a culture or a social group, justice is meaningless.
Exactly.
I mean, really, the justice of nature may seem very cruel if you're alone in the wilderness, but we're trying to formulate ways that we can get along with others in our community in a way that promotes the greatest amount of, well, we're going to get into trouble if we say greatest amount of anything. Right. That promotes a sufficient amount of
Benefit?
Benefits, yes,
Mm-hmm.
to not just the members of the society. I think Plato is kind of talking about the benefits to the city or the community as well.
Right, I think in some ways Plato was talking about the city in terms of that sense of community and not as it being, opposed to the individual. The individual is part of the city. But, something we touched on earlier was that arrow of evolution, how justice has changed, the idea of justice. And I think it was Dawkins who said that it seems to be improving over time with a sawtooth projection.
Well, I think you've covered my point. Let me clear the line. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Freethought.
And so has what we look at as what's just for humankind, has it really changed over time? Are we evolving in our ideas of justice? I was reading some of the rules of Hammurabi, which go back thousands of years, predating the Ten Commandments. One of the things I found interesting were that if you made an accusation against someone that turned out to be false, a false accusation, you could be stoned to death. Now, in some ways, I like the idea of having justice meted out against false accusations. But, my goodness, being put to death? Really?
Is that a just or balanced response?
Right, and I think we've come a long way. That would be like saying, if you lie, you die. And I think our sense of justice and our ideas of just punishment have come a long way from that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, which is kind of based on this authoritarian God, does not prescribe for instance, for the Ten Commandments, does not just prescribe an immediate punishment. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not commit adultery. Where in the Code of Hammurabi, he says, if you lie in certain ways, you will die. If you steal, you will die. If you commit adultery, well, now we get into some of the class distinctions that where some of the punishment may be different for different classes. So from some of the descriptions I have read of the Babylonian society of the time, it was a very safe place. One writer commented that one could get in a carriage and ride from all the way to the Mediterranean safely without any particular worry. Well,
But don't you think the citizens were afraid to do just about anything? Because they would be put to death for any infractions.
So here we see the dilemma there, that by enforcing these harsh conditions or threatening to enforce them, you have a very stable society or culture. But then it is a real problem for the individual who, in some cases, may do something inadvertently and still be subject to extreme punishment.
And then there's always the question about extenuating circumstances. You know, there are times when perhaps stealing might be okay, especially if you have plans to make amends later on. But you know, to save your life, you might have to steal resources at the time.
That's another aspect of the Code of Hammurabi, in that in many instances it provides for a reparation if your ox gores another person's ox.
And
then,
of course, you can't control your ox, can you?
then reparations may be, well, you have to replace his ox.
Exactly.
Or if a builder builds a house that falls down, not injuring anyone, well, he's required to go back and rebuild it. But you raised the issue of maybe in some cases stealing because of great hunger or deprivation. And so that a society must also provide a recourse for that,
Yes.
a remedy for that, so that the citizens are not subject to these extreme conditions. Well, that gets us to the theories of distributive justice. The idea that, well, let's see. Social justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities and privileges within a society. That's what social justice refers to. Classically, justice, especially corrective justice or distributive justice, ensured that individuals both fulfilled their societal roles and received what was due from society. Social justice assigns rights and duties in the institutions of society, which enables people to receive the basic benefits and also the burdens of cooperation. The relevant institutions can include education, health care, social security, labor rights, as well as a broader system of public services, progressive taxation, and regulation of markets to ensure fair distribution of wealth equal opportunity, equality of outcome, and no gross social injustice.
So essential to the concept of social justice is the distribution of wealth, power, respect, opportunities, food, education, healthcare, etc. This is the subject of distributional justice.
So theories of distributive justice need to answer three questions. What goods are to be distributed? Is it to be wealth, power, respect, opportunities, or some combination of these things? Second, between what entities are they distributed? Humans, dead, living, future, sentient beings, the members of a single society or nations? What is the proper distribution? Equal, meritocratic, according to social status, according to need, based on property rights, or non-aggression?
So distributive justice theorists generally do not answer questions of who has the right to enforce a particular favored distribution. On the other hand, property rights theorists argue that there is no favored distribution. Rather, distribution should be based simply on whatever distribution results from lawful interactions or transactions, that is, transactions which are not illicit.
So this next area describes some of the theories of, as we said, theories of distributive justice and the attempts to answer these questions. According to the egalitarian, justice can exist only within the parameters of equality. This basic view can be elaborated in many ways according to what goods are distributed: wealth, respect, opportunity, and who or what they are to be distributed equally among: individuals, families, nations, races, species. Egalitarian theories are typically less concerned with discussing who exactly will do the distributing, or what the effects their recommended policies might have on the production of goods, services, or resources which they wish to distribute. Now, we can see that I think many of us would think it not real justice to provide equally for the lazy, those who are not willing to support the community or themselves, and those who are very industrious, working hard, which might be a meritocratic.
At the same time, if you look at justice across all levels of classes, for instance, on the one hand, some people think people at the lower end are lazy and moochers is the term used, but then on the upper end of that same scale, there are people who do so little for so much. So is that just, those are issues that need to be examined.
Yeah, we'll see later when we talk about property rights that you can get some grave inequities there. We recall that even in our own country, when it was founded, that the right to vote depended on someone holding property.
Right.
So, and they owning property, no matter how they got it, whether it was the result of hard work or whether it was something that was given to them or inherited from hardworking parents.
Okay, and then there's fairness. In his A Theory of Justice, John Rawls used a social contract argument to show that justice, and especially distributive justice, is a form of fairness, an impartial distribution of goods. Rawls asks us to imagine ourselves behind a veil of ignorance that denies us all knowledge of our personalities, social statuses, moral characters, wealth, talents, and life plans. and then asks what theory of justice we would choose to govern our society when the veil is lifted, if we wanted to do the best that we could for ourselves. We don't know who in particular we are, and therefore can't bias the decision in our own favor. So the decision in ignorance models fairness because it excludes selfish bias. Rawls argues that each of us would not reject the utilitarian theory of justice that we should maximize welfare because of the risk that we might turn out to be someone whose own good is sacrificed for greater benefits of others. Instead, we would endorse Rawls' two principles of justice. Each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with a similar system of liberty for all. And social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both to the greatest benefit of the least advantage and consistent with the just savings principle, and attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity.
This imagined choice justifies these principles as the principles of justice for us, because we would agree to them in a fair decision procedure. Rawls' theory distinguishes two kinds of goods. One, the good of liberty rights, and two, the social and economic goods, that is, wealth, income, and power, and applies different distributions to them. Equality between citizens for one, equality unless inequality improves the position of the worst off.
In one sense, theories of distributive justice may assert that everyone should get what they deserve. Theories disagree on the meaning of what is deserved. The main distinction is between theories that argue the basis of just deserts ought to be held equally by everyone and therefore derive egalitarian accounts of distributive justice, and theories that argue the basis of just deserts is unequally distributed on the basis of, for instance, hard work, and therefore derive accounts of distributive justice by which some should have more than others.
According to the meritocratic theories, goods, especially wealth and social status, should be distributed to match individual merit, which is usually understood as some combination of talent and hard work. According to needs-based theories, goods, especially such basic goods as food, shelter, and medical care, should be distributed to meet the individual's basic needs for them. Marxism can be regarded as a needs-based theory on some readings of Marx's slogan, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." According to contribution-based theories, goods should be distributed to match an individual's contribution to the overall good.
And Jonas, I'm looking at our time, and I think it's about time for us to take our program break.
Okay. So, in case you are just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Knoxville Community Access Television, Channel 12 or 194, depending on your local cable network. But if you don't subscribe to one of these channels, you can view us streaming online. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today, July 14th, 2015. And viewers can call in now to the number on the screen with a short comment or question. Call in now while we go to an informative break.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. Ask Purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists and agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our Tuesday meeting is going on right now at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Knoxville Old City.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions on subjects topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for a book club. The title of the August book is Sons of Wichita, How the Koch brothers Became America's Most Powerful and Private Dynasty. It's by Daniel Schulman. That's Sunday, August 9th, 2 p.m. at Books A Million on Kingston Pike. The public is invited to participate. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalist.org to find the rest of the calendar of books and join us at the new location, Books A Million, 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, every second Sunday at 2 p.m.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in Zeus, Zoroaster, or Yahweh,
You
you're
are not alone.
Okay, could we, before we go to the next theory of social justice, could we back up a little bit?
Okay.
The claim is that by Rawls' criterion, where you imagine yourself in a situation where you could be involved in any particular situation. You could be wealthy, you could be poor, you could be talented or not talented. And so you would set up rules or set up distributions such that you would be equally, you wouldn't be severely disadvantaged if you suddenly popped up in any one of these situations. Maybe you say, okay, we'll have a lot of big rewards for the our fearless leader, and just gather that from the riffraff down there. And then, lo and behold, you appear on Earth as one of the riffraff. So see, that would be a dangerous kind of situation. It's kind of like, you know, when you have a pie that you're cutting, dividing for several people, the rule that we use in our family is that the person who cuts the pie gets the last piece. And this assures some real attempt to make the distribution equal. But beyond that, I think it's somewhat simplistic in that people have different talents. Some people are talented musically, some mathematically, some artistically, and so on. And these people need or would desire different parts of the distribution. Like an artist might like to have media to work with, but that may be of little interest to someone else. And so I think the problem is that society is very complicated, and it's difficult for one person to imagine themselves as to, you know, what it would be like in these different situations and what they might like to have to support them.
I think if we go back and look at Rawls' veil of innocence, I think what he was trying to achieve was that no matter where you popped up, like you said, popping up as one of the riffraff, but no matter where you popped up in that scale of that ongoing scale of circumstances, you would feel that you would be satisfied with how justice was meted out to you, or how the distribution was meted out. That maybe you were at the lower end, but you didn't have very many talents, and so that seemed just to you. Or maybe you were at the upper end and you weren't obscenely wealthy, but you felt satisfied with the distribution at that upper end.
Yeah, I think that our expectations are perhaps greater than they should be, and to have a fair sense of justice among everyone. Like we'll say, well, I want the best car, I want the best house, I want the best shoes. When to achieve this, it would be at the disadvantage of other people. And perhaps a better way is, well, what car would I be satisfied with? Or,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing.
And would I be satisfied to work enough to get that car that I would be satisfied with?
Oh, well, anyway, continuing on in this next category, property rights, is...
I think it's going to cover some of what we were just discussing, too.
Yeah, I really have problems with some of the property rights theorists. Okay, in Anarchy, State, and Utopia, Robert Nozick argues that distributive justice is not a matter of the whole distribution matching an ideal pattern, but each individual entitlement having the right kind of history. It is just that a person has some good, especially right kind of property, some property right, if and only if they came to have it by a history made up entirely of events of two kinds: just acquisition, especially by working on unowned things.
Yes, that unowned things.
And just transfer, that is free gift, sales, or other agreement, but not theft, that is by force or fraud. If the chain of events leading up to a person having something meets this criteria, they are entitled to it. That is, that they possess it. That they possess it is just, and what anyone else does or doesn't have or need is irrelevant. But
That's a sticky situation, isn't it?
I think it's like playing chess and only working out what the next move might be instead of many moves ahead, because this by Rawls kind of argument, I mean, you may be in a situation where, I don't know, you have a certain status, but if other people are giving you things, then it kind of upsets things in a way that is difficult to figure out ahead of time.
Well, if we look at this idea of just acquisition and just transfer, even in terms of the history of our own country, many of the Native American tribes had no concept of ownership of land or ownership of resources. It just belonged, or it didn't even belong. The Native Americans just used it to their advantage. But the Europeans who came in did have this concept of ownership of land. So they took the land and owned it, something that they considered unowned.
Yeah, I would add another qualification there, individual ownership, because certainly a tribe may feel a sense of ownership of a certain land or hunting grounds and so on. And it was when the Europeans came in and said, I want this for me, not for necessarily
For the
greater community.
Right.
Yeah.
So, this just acquisition, there are some problems with that, I think, when we're talking about property rights. And then, of course, those property rights are then carried down generation to generation once the unowned property has been acquired.
Yeah, that's where I have some problems with this elimination of inheritance taxes kind of thing. And it can in fact result in those who inherit wealth or whatever not achieving that they are capable of, because
They have no incentive then to be producers, right? They're just consumers of.
yeah, I think it can work out to their disadvantage. But then I think we, in listening to some of our politicians and so on, they talk about and distribution of taxes and so on. They say, well, this rich owner of this company arrived at his wealth fairly, but I ask, well, yes, he might have arrived at it consistent with the laws and everything, but if you considered the welfare of his employees, who he could have compensated more, the welfare of the public, his customers, who could have benefited from lower prices and so on, one I think has to question the justice of some of those profits.
Well, it's not only the welfare of his workers or the lowering of prices for the consumers, but any of these people who are considered self-made have actually stood on the shoulders of people who've gone before them, or at least the infrastructure of the culture. So they're using shipping on the roads that have been built through taxpayer money, or using the flight system that we have in place. So there aren't really people who are totally self-made.
Okay, so on the basis of this theory of distributive justice based on property rights, Nozick argues that all attempts to redistribute goods according to an ideal pattern without the consent of the owners are theft. I see how this appeals to some of our wealthy right-wing supporters. In particular, redistributive taxation is theft. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to continue on
Yes,
from there.
go.
It says some property rights theorists, like Nozick, also take a consequentialist view of distributive justice and argue that property rights-based justice also has the effect of maximizing the overall wealth of an economic system. They explain that voluntary, non-coerced transactions always have a property called Pareto efficiency. The result is that the world is better off if in an absolute sense, and no one is worse off. Such consequentialist property rights theorists argue that respecting property rights maximizes the number of Pareto efficient transactions in the world and minimize the number of non-Pareto efficient transactions. And I'm not sure I understand that term Pareto, but let's carry on for the moment. The result is that the world will have generated the greatest total benefit from the limited, scarce resources available in the world. Further, this will have been accomplished without taking anything away from anyone unlawfully, that is, through taxation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have several problems there in that the business of the laws can be arranged to favor certain people over others.
We haven't seen that happen, have we?
Oh, but also I see a real problem here that they're talking about maximizing the overall wealth of an economic system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our topic here has to do with social justice.
Right.
And now he's trying to maximize wealth in another sphere.
Right. It's like smoke and mirrors. Now we're talking about something different.
Okay, time is short, so let's skip this last one. I had a point that I wanted to make here. Now, recall from Plato's Republic, Socrates uses the parable of the ship to illustrate this point. The unjust city is like a ship in the open ocean, crewed by a powerful but drunken captain, the common people, a group of untrustworthy advisors who try to manipulate the captain into giving them power over the ship's course, the politicians, and a navigator, the philosopher, who is the only one who knows how to get the ship to the port. For Socrates, the only way the ship will reach its destination, the good, is if the navigator takes charge.
The philosopher, huh?
But given the spread of theories about justice that we have been discussing, is it wise to be guided by a philosopher?
That's a great question. I'm not sure we have time to delve into that sufficiently.
Okay, well, let's see, we've just got a minute or so left. But back to the theme of the program, the evolution of justice. We consider the arc of social evolution. For some 4,000 years, there was really little change in social structure, class, gender distinctions, slavery, and the distribution of social wealth. One can point out high points such as the status of women in Sparta and Rome, which we didn't get to, but these cultures were extremely localized in space and time. It is only recently, in the past 200 years, say, that we've seen a rapid change in the status of women and the evolution of slavery. Though women are still subjugated in places and slavery is still practiced in many forms. So we might ask, what are the factors that have resulted in this rapid recent change?
And I think that will have to be another program.
Well, let me clear. Cultural disruption, world wars, industrial revolution, influence of science, questioning religion, world travel, worldwide communication, influential world powers, agricultural revolution, and the United Nations.
Well, it's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Alida.
And I'm Jonas Holderman. Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station and at 2100 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
We would like to thank our viewers and send our thanks to Sam and Carl and Freethought and to the support of the staff from CTV Knox and all our callers.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious group in America. Right here in East Tennessee, the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee are places you can find fellowship and fun. You are not alone.
You are not alone.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes.